I thought losing Ethan was the worst thing that could happen. I was wrong. The worst was watching his mother walk into my home like she still owned him and now me. It was still early spring, but the Tennessee air carried a stubborn chill that wrapped itself around our little house like a silent warning. The porch creaked when I stepped out that morning, and the mailbox was empty again. No letters, no word from Ethan, just the silence of unanswered questions. Inside the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the toast I never got around to eating. I was already behind on my freelance bookkeeping work, but the nausea had come earlier than usual today, and I'd spent the better part of an hour bent over the bathroom sink. My body wasn't cooperating, but I pushed through. I always had. From cleaning toilets through college to balancing accounts for trucking companies, now I never waited for life to be kind. I just survived it. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Ethan's mug, his favorite chipped at the rim, and wondered if he'd ever touch it again. He'd left 3 weeks ago for a cargo run out of state. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the silence. No call when he arrived. No call the next night. When I called his supervisor, the man told me Ethan had clocked in, made the run, and never returned. Police labeled it a missing person case, but without signs of foul play, no one was in a rush. I was alone, and pregnant, and drowning. That evening, the sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the porch. I sat on the worn-out couch nursing a warm glass of ginger tea and rereading Ethan's last text. "Callie, don't worry. I'll be back soon. Promise." It had no punctuation, just like Ethan when he was distracted. A gust of wind rattled the windows. Then came the knock. Not a soft tap. A hard, familiar rap. The kind Lorraine Morrison always used, firm and titled. I didn't move at first. My heart kicked against my ribs. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was a neighbor. Another knock. Same rhythm. Same arrogance. When I opened the door, she stood there with her shoulders square and her chin high. Her dark coat flared out at the sides, and beside her, Crystal clutched a designer duffel bag and avoided my eyes. Lorraine didn't wait to be invited in. "Ethan's gone." She set her eyes scanning the house like it was on a real estate listing. "This is still his house. You should leave." The words hit like frostbite. Sharp, numbing. My mouth opened, but no sound came. She stepped past me like I was furniture. Crystal followed silently. She dropped her bag by the stairs and plopped onto the couch like it belonged to her. Like she had sat there 1,000 times. I stood frozen in the doorway, fingers curled around the edge of the frame. In that moment, I wasn't just grieving Ethan, I was watching my world collapse in slow motion. Lorraine walked through the kitchen, inspecting everything. She made a face at the stack of plates in the sink. This place has gone to ruin. I wanted to scream, to tell her this was my home, that Ethan had told me on the first night we moved in. No matter how small this house is ours, yours. I remembered that night. The pizza box on the floor, the secondhand couch. Ethan pulling me close and whispering that no matter what happened, this house would always be mine. I didn't know then how much that promise would be tested. Now Lorraine's voice echoed from the hallway. "We'll be staying for a while. Ethan would have wanted us here." I turned slowly to face her, my heart pounding against ribs that felt too small for my breath. She was already halfway up the stairs. Crystal was scrolling on her phone like none of this mattered. I placed a hand on my belly. This isn't just grief. This is invasion. I may have lost Ethan, but I won't lose myself. Family is blood, Lorraine said, with the kind of venom that drips slowly. And you were temporary. The air inside the house had changed. The walls seemed closer, the floors colder beneath my bare feet. It was early April, but the warmth we'd once filled this house with had vanished, replaced by the sharp chill of intrusion. Every photo on the wall had been turned, every item of mine touched, moved, or questioned. This place used to feel like love. Now it felt like a waiting room for exile. Lorraine had claimed the master bedroom before I could say a word. She walked in with her suitcase like she was returning from vacation, not invading someone else's home. Crystal said nothing, just carried her own bags upstairs past me like I wasn't even there. I didn't argue. Not then. I had learned early that arguments with Lorraine weren't won with logic. They were won by wearing the other person down. That night, I slept on the couch, curled up beneath an old quilt Ethan's grandmother had made. It still smelled like cedar and dust and comfort. My back ached. My stomach churned. The baby didn't care where I was sleeping, only that I stayed awake with nausea and nerves. I thought about our first dinner with Lorraine almost 2 years ago. Ethan had taken me to her house in Jackson, dressed in his best jeans and a button-down shirt he hadn't ironed quite right. The roast was dry. The wine was expensive. Lorraine had leaned forward, eyes sharp and voice soft. "Women like you trap men from good families," she said, the edge hidden beneath a smile. Crystal had laughed, then high-pitched cruel. I remembered how small I'd felt, but Ethan had taken my hand under the table. "They'll come around," he'd whispered. They never did. Now I was in their way. By the third day, Lorraine was walking around the house like a queen surveying conquered land. She rearranged the living room furniture, placed a framed photo of Ethan as a child over our wedding portrait, and muttered about the filth I hadn't cleaned. I kept quiet, documenting everything with my phone photos of her things and my Spaces audio, of her telling Crystal to just act like it's ours again. I didn't know what I'd do with the evidence yet, but I needed something solid. Something that proved I wasn't crazy. Crystal was different. Still cold, still distant, but not cruel. Not like her mother. I caught her staring at me more than once, her brow creased like she was trying to solve a riddle. Once in the hallway, she paused and looked like she wanted to say something. But then Lorraine called her name and the moment passed. On the fourth night, I slipped into the hallway after midnight, my body aching, my mind racing. I opened the closet under the stairs, feeling through the darkness for the box Ethan had tucked behind the tool bag. It was there, metal dusty, locked. The key had always been taped to the inside of his boot. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside his military discharge papers. A folded flag. A photo of us on the beach laughing, the wind tangled in my hair. And then at the bottom, a sealed envelope in his handwriting. "If anything happens to me." I sat there on the floor, the envelope in my hands, heart pounding in my throat. I didn't open it. Not yet. Not with Lorraine pacing upstairs like a warden. The next morning, I found her already in the kitchen, frying eggs and humming some old country hymn. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "You're not on the deed," she said calmly, like she was talking about the weather. "You'll be gone by next week." I didn't reply. I picked up a piece of toast, forced it into my mouth, and chewed past the nausea. She smiled. I stood, slipped on my coat, and turned toward the door. The envelope was already in my pocket, pressed close to my side. Not yet, I thought. You don't get to win this easily. The law doesn't care who cries louder. It cares who planned smarter. The letter felt heavier in my coat pocket than anything I'd ever carried. It was a plain envelope, unremarkable on the outside, but I knew it held the weight of Ethan's intentions, his last act of protection. And now it was my turn to do something with it. Mid-April in downtown Jackson was busier than usual, the sidewalks alive with voices, car horns, and the occasional waft of barbecue from a street vendor. I kept my head down, one hand on my belly and the other gripping the strap of my bag. The nausea hadn't left, but today I was powered by something stronger than ginger tea resolve. Ava Martin's office was tucked between a pawn shop and a dry cleaner. Small, beige, and easy to miss unless you knew where to look. But I knew. We'd gone to community college together. She'd studied criminal justice while I'd crammed business classes between cleaning shifts. We hadn't talked in years, but when I called that morning and said I need to know if a power of attorney is real, she told me to come immediately. Ava opened the door herself, still wearing the same dark-rimmed glasses and no-nonsense bun I remembered. "You look like hell," she said, stepping aside. "Thanks," I muttered. It's been a month. Her office smelled like ink and lemon polish. I sat across from her desk, took out the envelope, and slid it across the surface. She opened it carefully, like it might explode. Inside were 2 documents and a short letter folded once. She read silently, her brow furrowing deeper with every line. Then she exhaled slowly. "Callie, this is real. It's notarized, dated, and witnessed. Ethan signed over full power of attorney to you, assets, property, everything. And this letter." She tapped the handwritten page, eyes narrowing. This is more than personal. This is evidence. I didn't speak. I couldn't. For the first time in weeks, I didn't have to. Ava continued, more lawyer than friend now. This gives you legal standing to control everything Ethan owned or was part of. The house's bank accounts, even decisions about his disappearance if it comes to that. It doesn't matter what Lorraine thinks. You're the legal next of kin. The words sank in slowly like medicine you don't trust until the fever breaks. And the letter I asked. Ava nodded. He wrote it for you. It's emotional but also clear. He knew someone might come after you. He suspected his family would contest things if anything happened. He wanted you to be protected. And now you are. I let out a shaky breath, almost a laugh. She smiled just a little. We'll file the POA with the county clerk immediately. In the meantime, start taking control utilities, joint accounts, anything in his name. If Lorraine challenges it, we'll be ready. I thanked her, standing on legs that felt less fragile now. She walked me out with a firm pat on my shoulder. Back at the house, the light was different. Less muted. More mine. Lorraine and Crystal were already seated at the dinner table eating the soup I'd made without asking, of course. I walked in, calmly placed my bag on the kitchen counter, and pulled out a single sealed envelope. I didn't speak as I placed it in front of Lorraine. She looked up at me, spoon midair. You might want to open that. Crystal paused. Spoon frozen halfway to her lips. Lorraine tore the envelope open with the same casual disdain she'd used since stepping foot in this house. Her eyes scanned the page, then stopped. The color drained from her face. Crystal leaned in, whispering, What is this? If you really think I'm just some little girl clinging to your son's memory, maybe it's time you read what he left behind. The sun had barely dipped beneath the tree line when I laid the folder on the coffee table. Lorraine and Crystal sat like they owned the couch, legs crossed, wine glasses, half-full TV humming something forgettable in the background. I had given them weeks. Weeks to step back, step out, or at the very least, step off. But they hadn't. And now we were done pretending. The room was thick with false comfort. Lorraine had even lit one of my candles, a eucalyptus one Ethan bought during a random Walmart trip. She used to call scents like that cheap and tacky. Now it flickered beside her, scenting the room she planned to commandeer. Before you go any further, I said calmly, you should look at this. I opened the folder with purpose. 2 documents, one notarized power of attorney and a printed scan of Ethan's letter, his handwriting clear and strong even on paper. Lorraine scoffed before her eyes even landed on the content. More paperwork. Callie, honey, if you think waving a few pieces of paper is going to change reality. Actually, I said, sliding the papers closer, that's exactly what they're going to do. Crystal leaned forward, cautious, scanning the front page. Lorraine lifted the document with 2 fingers like it was something diseased. This isn't even original. And I've never seen Ethan write like this. You could have typed this on your laptop. I didn't, I said, already dialing. She rolled her eyes. You know this won't hold in court. I'll call every family lawyer in Tennessee if I have to. Then you can start with Ava Martin. I tapped the speaker icon and placed my phone on the table. Ava's voice rang clear. Lorraine Morrison, correct? Lorraine blinked. My name is Ava Martin. I'm a licensed attorney with full access to all legal documentation provided by Ethan Morrison, including a notarized power of attorney and a handwritten letter of intent. These documents are valid under Tennessee state law. Any attempt to evict or remove Callie Morrison from her legal residence could be interpreted as harassment or civil trespass. Silence. Lorraine's jaw clenched, her fingers tightening on the document. Would you like to take this to court? Ava asked, smooth and sharp. Because I'm prepared for that too. Crystal reached for the letter. Can I? She asked quietly. I nodded once. She unfolded the page slowly and began to read aloud, her voice shaky. Callie is my family. She's the only one who knows me, who stood beside me when I had nothing. If I'm gone, protect her, especially from my own. Crystal stopped reading. Her eyes stayed locked on the paper, lips parted as if she'd been punched in the gut. Lorraine stood abruptly, hands trembling. This isn't over, she hissed, voice lower than I'd ever heard it. I leaned in just enough to meet her gaze. Oh, I know. But now we're playing by the rules. Mine. She stormed off to her room, muttering about legal scams and forged signatures. I ended the call with Ava, thanked her softly, then turned to head upstairs. Crystal's voice followed me. I didn't know he wrote that. I paused at the landing. I said nothing. Just walked away. Later that night, I changed the locks. Ava had sent a locksmith she trusted. A quiet man with kind eyes who didn't ask questions. When the last bolt slid into place, the sound echoed like a full stop at the end of a sentence. For the first time in weeks, the house felt like it might belong to me again. Maybe not in their eyes, but legally, and more importantly, in spirit it did. They say blood is thicker than water. But ink on a legal document? That's even stronger. Mid-May brought an early heat wave to Jackson. The sun pressed its weight against the Morrison house windows, wide open but unable to carry out the tension simmering inside. Outside, the trees had bloomed fully. Inside, everything felt ready to snap. Lorraine had gone quiet, too quiet. After the letter, the locks, and Ava's warnings, she hadn't stormed out or confronted me again. Instead, she'd begun her campaign of passive resistance, slamming doors, moving things I'd organized, turning down the thermostat just to spite me. But I had already moved beyond the small battles. I had a war to win. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through an email from Ava. Attached was the official confirmation Ethan's legal filings had months ago triggered a survivorship clause. Because of the power of attorney and the terms of our marriage, I was entitled to full ownership of the property. Ethan had prepared everything meticulously like a soldier laying traps long after the enemy had passed through. There was more. The second email contained a scanned copy of the insurance policy. His life insurance had been activated after his disappearance. I was the sole beneficiary. No one else was named. Not his mother, not his sister. Only me. A knock on the table made me look up. Crystal hovered awkwardly in the doorway. "Dinner's ready," she muttered. It wasn't. I'd cooked, of course, because Lorraine had suddenly forgotten how to use the stove. But Crystal had started helping, offering to chop or clean. Small things, but enough to make me wonder if something in her was shifting. We sat in silence at the table, bowls of stew steaming between us. Lorraine sat across from me, her expression tight lips pursed. She hadn't spoken more than a few sentences all day. Her wine glass was full. That was unusual. I cleared my throat. I have something to say. Lorraine didn't look up. Crystal did. I'm pregnant. The silence was immediate, like someone had pulled the plug on the room's electricity. Lorraine's spoon paused midair. Crystal froze, eyes widening. "You're lying," Lorraine said finally, her voice low and acidic. "No," I said. "I'm not." Lorraine scoffed. "You expect me to believe that's Ethan's child?" I placed my hand gently on my stomach, not as a gesture for them, but for me. "I have no need for your belief. Just a DNA test." Crystal blinked. "You're..." "Really," I nodded once. 18 weeks now. "You've known all this time?" Lorraine asked, venom building again. "I've known since just before you arrived," I said. "And I've kept it quiet. But I'm done hiding." From her end of the table, Lorraine's hands clenched. "You don't get to rewrite what he wanted." I didn't. He did. I walked to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were the latest documents Ava had sent me. I didn't hand them over, just placed them where they could see the headers. Crystal leaned in to read. He listed you for everything." "Yes." There was a long pause. "I've scheduled the DNA test," I added. "Publicly, just in case there's any doubt. We'll let the truth settle things." Lorraine's face lost what little color it had left. Crystal stood abruptly. I need some air." She slipped out the back door, leaving it open behind her. The wind shifted slightly, stirring the curtains. Lorraine didn't move. I sat back down, not to plead, not to argue, but to eat. One spoonful at a time, reclaiming my place, my space. Upstairs, the light in the guest room flicked on. Crystal didn't come back down that night. "You told me to leave." but this house is mine, and the future growing inside me. That's Ethan's. That's home. The house smelled like lemons and sunlight. Not wine, not resentment, not silence thick enough to choke on. The curtains were clean, the couch cushions realigned, and the back garden, Ethan's garden, was in full bloom. Tomatoes, basil, the faintest trace of lavender in the breeze. I opened all the windows this morning. Not because I needed the air, but because I needed the house to exhale with me. On the table sat the DNA results. I didn't need to read them again. I'd memorized the words, hours ago, paternity confirmed. Ethan Morrison, 9.98% match. Next to it was the official cease and desist order Ava had drafted. Lorraine was now legally barred from setting foot on this property. Any attempt would bring legal consequences she could no longer afford to ignore. Lorraine was already packed her suitcase, a harsh black presence at the foot of the stairs. She hadn't said much since the envelope arrived. Ava had come by earlier to deliver everything in person, her eyes bright with satisfaction and her voice calm and professional. "You did it," she'd whispered before leaving. "You made it out whole." Now Lorraine stood in the foyer, her shoulders rigid, her jaw tight. Crystal was behind her, holding her own duffel bag, gaze distant. She hadn't said a word in over an hour. "You think you've won?" Lorraine said quietly. "You think this proves something?" "I don't need to prove anything," I said. "The law already has." Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "You stole my son's life." My voice was steady. "No, I built one with him. You tried to tear it down, but I'm still standing." She looked at me like she wanted to say more. Something cruel. Something final. But the words wouldn't come. Or maybe they came and even she realized how hollow they'd sound now. Crystal stepped forward. "I'll wait outside," she murmured. Then to me softer. "Thank you for not becoming her." I watched them leave from the porch. Lorraine didn't look back. Crystal did just once, a quick glance over her shoulder before she slipped into the passenger seat. When the car rolled down the driveway, it didn't feel like a victory parade. It felt like release. I sat on the porch swing, one hand resting on my belly. The other clutched Ethan's dog tags, still cool despite the heat. They clinked softly together as I turned them in my palm. Later, I made my way to the garden. The sun was beginning to dip gold, pouring over everything Ethan had planted. I sank into the old Adirondack chair and unfolded the final page of his letter. "If you're reading this, it means you made it. I knew you would. I love you, and I trust you to protect what we built even when I'm not there. Especially then." I closed my eyes, letting the wind carry the scent of lavender and soil. The house was quiet again, not with emptiness, but with peace. And as dusk fell, I felt the faintest kick beneath my palm. A heartbeat beneath my own. The story wasn't over. But this chapter, this one belonged to me. The garden bloomed not just with flowers, but with the quiet triumph of a woman who refused to be erased. What began as loss became a war, and she won not with rage, but with truth written in ink and the will to endure. Justice, delayed though it was, arrived with the weight of every silent wrong finally spoken aloud. When injustice is met with unwavering courage, the final verdict can echo through a lifetime. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply not leaving.